The scorching winds of summer brought more than just dust and desperate prayers to Hangtown, California, in 1853. They carried whispers about the young woman who lived alone at the edge of town, the one folks claimed had brought the sickness that was slowly claiming their children, their futures, and their hope. Beatrice Morgan stood at her cabin door, watching as another funeral procession made its way to the makeshift cemetery that had grown too large too quickly in recent weeks. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat, knowing the coldness she felt came from within rather than without. The weight of accusing eyes followed her everywhere now, ever since the typhoid had started spreading through Hangtown like wildfire through dry brush. Being the town's newest arrival and a woman who kept to herself with her strange herbs and remedies, she'd become an easy target for fear-fueled blame. Which, someone had painted across her door just yesterday. The red paint had dripped down like blood. Beatrice sighed and retreated inside, bolting the door behind her. The small cabin that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed more like a prison. She moved to the wooden table where her father's medical books lay open, surrounded by various herbs and tinctures. As the daughter of a Philadelphia doctor, she'd learned his trade through observation and stolen moments of study when he wasn't looking education not meant for a woman's mind, he'd often reminded her. Yet here she was, trying to make sense of an illness she couldn't control, desperately searching for answers while the town searched for someone to blame. A sharp knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Beatrice froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Miss Morgan," a deep voice called out. "It's Samuel Xavier. I've brought your water." Relief flooded through her. Samuel Xavier was one of the few people in Hangtown who still spoke to her. A cowboy who worked at the Donovan Ranch just outside of town. He'd taken to bringing her water when the townspeople had blocked her access to the well. Beatrice unbolted the door and opened it just enough to see him standing there, two heavy buckets in hand, his broad shoulders straining against his cotton shirt. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could still see the kindness in them, a rare commodity these days. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said softly, opening the door wider to allow him entry. "Just Sam, Miss Morgan," he reminded her as he stepped inside and set the buckets down, "and it's no trouble." Samuel Xavier had caught her eye from the moment she'd arrived in Hangtown 6 months ago. Tall and strong with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Unlike the other men who'd tried to court her with bold declarations and unwanted advances, Sam had kept a respectful distance, offering only small kindnesses and the occasional tip of his hat when they passed on the street. "I heard what happened at the town meeting last night," he said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "I'm sorry." Beatrice turned away, busying herself with transferring water to her own containers. "There's nothing to be sorry for. People are scared and looking for answers." "They're looking for someone to blame," Sam corrected. "And that's not right. You've done nothing but try to help since this sickness started." "Tell that to Mrs. Peterson," Beatrice replied bitterly. "She lost her third child yesterday and came at me with a kitchen knife when I offered my condolences." Sam took a step closer. "This isn't your fault, Miss Morgan." "Beatrice," she said suddenly, looking up at him. "If I'm to call you Sam, then you must call me Beatrice." A small smile touched his lips. "Beatrice," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and feelings neither dared voice. Then Sam cleared his throat and gestured to the books on her table. "Your father was a doctor, wasn't he?" Beatrice nodded. "In Philadelphia. He taught me some, though he never approved of my interest in medicine, said it wasn't proper for a lady to concern herself with such matters." "And yet here you are, trying to save a town that wants your head," Sam said with admiration in his voice. "I'm not trying to be heroic," she insisted. I can't stand by and do nothing when I might have knowledge that could help." Sam's eyes traveled over the books and herbs. "Have you found anything?" Beatrice shook her head. "Nothing definitive. The The symptoms match typhoid fever, but I can't determine the source. It could be in the water, but people are falling ill who get their water from different sources. Maybe I could help, Sam offered. I'm no doctor, but I've got a good head on my shoulders and 2 strong hands. Beatrice looked at him in surprise. Why would you risk yourself like that? You've seen how they treat me. If they see you helping me, they'll turn on you too. Sam's jaw set in determination. Because I trust you, Beatrice. I've watched you these past months. You're kind, intelligent, and you care about people who'd sooner see you run out of town than thank you. If anyone can figure this out, it's you. His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, a comfort she hadn't realized she so desperately needed. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Thank you, she whispered, but I can't ask you to put yourself at risk. You didn't ask, Sam said simply. I offered. Now what do we do first? Before Beatrice could respond, shouting erupted outside. They both moved to the window to see a group of men approaching the cabin, led by Sheriff Wilson and Thomas Peterson, whose wife had threatened Beatrice just the day before. They're coming for me, Beatrice said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the fear coursing through her veins. Sam's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I won't let them hurt you. You can't stop a mob, Sam. Maybe not, he agreed, but I can stand beside you. I meant what I said, Beatrice. I trust you. The pounding on the door began, and Beatrice drew a deep breath. With Sam's hand still in hers, she moved to face whatever lay on the other side. Sheriff Wilson's weathered face was the first thing she saw when she opened the door. His expression was grim but not unkind. Behind him, the faces of the townspeople showed varying degrees of anger, fear, and grief. Miss Morgan, the sheriff began, I'm afraid I need to ask you to come with me. On what charges, Sheriff? Sam asked, stepping forward to stand beside Beatrice. The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly at Sam's presence, but he addressed his answer to Beatrice. No formal charges yet, miss, but the town council has requested you be held while we investigate the source of this sickness. She brought it here, Thomas Peterson shouted from the crowd. My children are dead because of her witchcraft, murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. That's nonsense, Sam said firmly. Miss Morgan has been trying to help, not harm. What are you doing here anyway, Xavier? Someone called out. She bewitched you too. Sam's posture stiffened. I'm here because I know an injustice when I see one. Miss Morgan is a healer, not a witch. She's been studying this illness, trying to find its cause. Convenient that she arrived just before the sickness, another voice chimed in. Beatrice stepped forward. Sheriff Wilson, I understand the town's fear, I truly do, but locking me away won't solve anything. The sickness will continue to spread unless we find its true source. And you know what that is, do you? The sheriff asked, not unkindly. Not yet, she admitted. But I have my father's medical books and knowledge. If you give me time, we've given you time, Peterson interrupted. And more children die every day. The crowd surged forward slightly, and Sam moved protectively closer to Beatrice. Sheriff, Sam said urgently, listen to reason. Miss Morgan is this town's best hope for finding answers. You know as well as I do that the doctor in Sacramento won't be here for at least another week, if he comes at all. Sheriff Wilson hesitated, his gaze moving between Sam, Beatrice, and the angry crowd. Finally, he held up his hands to quiet the townspeople. Here's what's going to happen, he announced. Miss Morgan will continue her research, but under supervision at the jail where I can ensure both her safety and the town's. Mr. Xavier, if you're so convinced of her innocence, you're welcome to assist her under my watchful eye. That's not good enough, Peterson protested. It's the best solution for now, the sheriff insisted firmly. Miss Morgan gets protection from this mob, and you all get the assurance that she's not free to cause more harm if indeed she's causing any at all. Sam looked at Beatrice questioningly. She nodded slightly, knowing it was the best compromise they could hope for. At least in the jail, she'd be safe from the mob's growing anger and she could continue her work. I'll get my books and supplies, she said quietly. I'll help, Sam offered, following her back inside. Once they were momentarily alone, Beatrice turned to him. You don't have to do this, Sam. Your reputation in town is not worth a damn if I stand by and let them persecute an innocent woman, he finished firmly. I meant what I said out there, Beatrice. I trust you, and I'm going to help you prove your innocence. As they gathered her supplies, their hands brushed occasionally, each touch sending warmth through Beatrice despite the dire circumstances. In the midst of accusations and fear, she'd found an unexpected ally, perhaps even something more. "Ready?" Sam asked as they finished packing. Beatrice nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they stepped out to face the town, neither knowing the challenges that lay ahead, but both drawing strength from the unexpected bond forming between them. The jail was a small, sturdy building in the center of town, boasting 2 cells and an office where Sheriff Wilson conducted his business. It was into this office that he led Beatrice and Sam, rather than locking her in one of the cells as the crowd outside had demanded. "You can set up here," the sheriff said, gesturing to his desk. "I'll take the smaller desk by the window." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "You're not locking me up," Sheriff Wilson sighed heavily. "Miss Morgan, I've known you for 6 months now. You've never struck me as the type to cause harm, intentional or otherwise, but I've also got a town full of grieving, frightened people who need to see that something's being done." "So this is all for show?" Sam asked, setting down Beatrice's books. "Let's call it a compromise," the sheriff replied. "Miss Morgan stays here where people feel she's contained, but she gets to continue her work comfortably. And you, Xavier, can come and go as needed to help her research or gather supplies." Beatrice felt a wave of gratitude toward the sheriff. "Thank you," he nodded curtly. "Don't thank me yet. You've got 3 days to find something concrete before the town council convenes again, and I can't promise I'll be able to protect you if you don't." 3 days, she repeated. "We'll do our best." "See that you do," Sheriff Wilson said, then added more gently, 2 more children fell ill this morning. The Dawson twins." Beatrice's heart sank. The Dawson twins were only 5 years old, sweet little girls with matching blonde braids who had once smiled shyly at her in the general store before their mother had hurried them away. "I'll need to see them," she said firmly. "All of the sick, if possible. And I need to know exactly what they ate, where they played, everything about their daily routines." The sheriff looked skeptical. "The families may not be willing to let you near their children." "Then I'll go," Sam offered. "I can ask the questions and report back to Beatrice." Sheriff Wilson considered this. "That might work. I'll accompany you to lend some official weight to the inquiries." He turned to Beatrice. "Will that suffice for now?" She nodded. "It's a start. Thank you, Sheriff." As the 2 men prepared to leave, Sam paused beside Beatrice. "What should I be looking for specifically?" Beatrice quickly wrote down a list of questions. "Ask about their water source, what they've eaten in the past week, if they've traveled anywhere, if they've had any visitors from out of town, and note any patterns in who's getting sick and who isn't." Sam took the list, his fingers lingering against hers for a moment. "I'll find something," he promised quietly. After they left, Beatrice turned to her books with renewed determination. The quiet of the sheriff's office was a welcome change from the constant fear she'd felt in her cabin. She spread her father's medical journals across the desk and began to read again about typhoid fever and other similar illnesses. Hours passed as she pored over the pages, making notes and drawing connections. The sun was beginning to set when the door opened, and Sam returned alone. "Where's the sheriff?" Beatrice asked, looking up from her work. "Had to break up a fight at the saloon," Sam explained, setting down his hat. "He'll be back soon." He pulled up a chair beside her. "I spoke with 6 families who have sick children or have lost someone. Wrote down everything like you asked." He handed her several sheets of paper covered in his neat handwriting. Beatrice began to read through his notes immediately, her mind working to find patterns. "Did you notice anything yourself?" she asked as she read. Sam nodded. "Actually, yes. Most of the children who fell ill first were from families who live near each other on the east side of town, and almost all the families mentioned their children played near Willow Creek." Beatrice's head snapped up. "Willow Creek, where exactly?" "There's a swimming hole about a 1/4 mile upstream from town, just past the old Wilson property. The children like to play there on hot days." Beatrice quickly flipped through her notes. "And the adults who fell ill?" "Most worked in or near the creek laundresses, mostly." and a couple of men who have been panning for gold there. A theory began to form in Beatrice's mind. Sam, I need to see this creek, tonight. Tonight, but the sheriff said I needed to stay here where people feel I'm contained, she reminded him. But he also said we have 3 days to find answers and children are dying, Sam. If my suspicions are correct, Willow Creek may be the source. Sam studied her face for a long moment before nodding. All right, but we wait until full dark and we stay out of sight. I won't risk your safety. Beatrice reached out impulsively and squeezed his hand. Thank you for believing in me. His eyes met hers, warm and sincere. I told you before, I trust you, Beatrice. As darkness fell over Hangtown, they slipped out the back door of the jail while the sheriff was still dealing with the aftermath of the saloon brawl. Sam led Beatrice through the shadows, taking back alleys and less traveled paths to avoid being seen. The night was warm but not unbearable, with a slight breeze that carried the scent of pine and sage. Under different circumstances, it might have been a pleasant evening stroll. As it was, Beatrice's nerves were stretched tight, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. We're almost there, Sam whispered as they approached the creek. The swimming hole is just ahead. Willow Creek was narrow but swift, its waters glinting silver in the moonlight. The swimming hole was a wider, deeper section where the current slowed, with large, smooth rocks perfect for children to jump from. In the daytime, it would be a picturesque spot. At night, it looked almost ethereal. Beatrice knelt by the water's edge and studied it carefully. I need to follow the creek upstream, she said. Can you show me the old Wilson property you mentioned? Sam nodded and offered his hand to help her up. The simple gesture of support, something she'd gone without for so long, made her heart flutter despite the gravity of their mission. They followed the creek upstream for about 10 minutes before Sam pointed to an abandoned cabin set back from the water. That's the old Wilson place. No one's lived there for at least 2 years, not since old man Wilson died. Beatrice frowned. Who owns it now? I believe the bank took it when Wilson's debts couldn't be paid. Why? Instead of answering, Beatrice moved closer to the cabin, her eyes scanning the ground around it. In the darkness, it was difficult to see details, but something caught her attention near what appeared to be an old outhouse structure. Sam, she called softly, do you have your matches? He came to her side and struck a match, illuminating the area briefly. In that flash of light, Beatrice saw what she feared: the outhouse had partially collapsed, and it sat precariously close to a small tributary that fed directly into Willow Creek. Strike another, please, she requested. When he did, she knelt to examine the ground more closely. The earth was damp and discolored, and there was a distinct odor that confirmed her suspicions. This outhouse is leaking into the water supply, she said grimly. And if someone with typhoid used it before Wilson died, or if any travelers have used it since. The waste would carry the disease downstream, Sam finished, understanding dawning on his face. To the swimming hole where the children play. And to the section where the women do laundry, Beatrice added. It explains everything: why it's spreading despite people using different wells, why it's affected certain parts of town more than others. Sam's expression was a mixture of relief and concern. We need to tell the sheriff right away, Beatrice nodded. And we need to warn people to stop using the creek water for anything drinking, bathing, laundry until it can be properly addressed. As they turned to head back to town, a voice called out from the darkness. Stop right there. Thomas Peterson emerged from the trees, a rifle pointed directly at Beatrice. His eyes were wild, his face haggard with grief and lack of sleep. I knew you'd come back to your witchcraft, he spat, poisoning our water at night when no one can see you. Mr. Peterson, Sam said calmly, stepping partially in front of Beatrice. Put the rifle down. We've just discovered the source of the illness. It's not Miss Morgan's doing. Lies, Peterson shouted. She's bewitched you, Xavier. Everyone knows it. Why else would a respected rancher be helping a witch? Because I'm not a witch, Beatrice said firmly, moving to stand beside Sam rather than behind him. I'm a woman with medical knowledge trying to save this town, including you and your family. The sickness is coming from that collapsed outhouse contaminating the creek. Peterson's rifle didn't waver. Convenient that you found the cause just when people started demanding justice. Mr. Peterson, Sam tried again, think about what you're doing. If you harm Miss Morgan, you're killing the one person who can help stop this sickness from claiming more lives. My children are already dead, Peterson cried, his voice breaking. What does it matter now? It matters because other children don't have to die, Beatrice said softly. Your neighbor's children, your friend's children, they can be saved if we act quickly. Something in her words seemed to reach him. The rifle lowered slightly as uncertainty crossed his face. How do I know you're telling the truth? He asked, his voice smaller now. Come see for yourself, Sam offered. We can show you exactly what we found. Peterson hesitated, then nodded warily. Show me, but keep your distance, woman. With the rifle still in hand but no longer aimed directly at them, Peterson followed as Sam led the way back to the outhouse. Using more matches, Sam illuminated the scene while Beatrice explained what they were seeing. The waste from this outhouse is seeping into that small stream, which feeds directly into Willow Creek, she pointed out. From there, it flows down to the swimming hole where the children play and further to where the laundry is done. Peterson's face paled as understanding dawned. My girls, they loved that swimming hole. They went there almost every day this summer. That's how they contracted the illness, Beatrice said gently. Not from witchcraft or curses, but from contaminated water. It's a disease called typhoid fever, and it spreads through water tainted by waste from someone carrying the bacteria. Peterson lowered his rifle completely, his shoulders slumping. So it wasn't your fault. No, Mr. Peterson, Sam answered for her. Miss Morgan has been trying to find the cause and cure this whole time while the town turned against her. Peterson looked at Beatrice with conflicted eyes. My wife will never forgive me for not avenging our children. There's nothing to avenge, Beatrice said. It was a tragic accident, not a malicious act, but you can help prevent more deaths by coming with us to the sheriff right now to report what we've found. After a moment's consideration, Peterson nodded. Let's go. The three of them made their way back to town, an unlikely alliance formed in the darkness of night. Sheriff Wilson was just returning to the jail when they arrived, and his expression of anger at finding Beatrice gone quickly turned to one of interest as they explained their discovery. An old outhouse, he repeated. Are you certain? As certain as I can be without laboratory tests, Beatrice confirmed. All the evidence points to contaminated water from Willow Creek being the source. We need to warn everyone immediately not to use that water for any purpose, and to boil any water they do use, even from wells, as a precaution. The sheriff looked to Peterson. And you believe this explanation, Thomas? Peterson nodded slowly. I've seen it with my own eyes. The outhouse is falling apart and leaking into a stream that feeds the creek. My girls swam there every day. His voice broke slightly. It makes sense. Sheriff Wilson's expression softened with sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, Thomas, truly. He turned back to Beatrice and Sam. I'll ring the town bell and call an emergency meeting right now. People need to know about this immediately. Within 30 minutes, the town square was filled with bleary-eyed citizens, many still in their night clothes, grumbling about being woken in the middle of the night. Their complaints died down as Sheriff Wilson explained what had been discovered, with Beatrice providing the medical explanation and Sam confirming the physical evidence they'd found. To Beatrice's surprise, Thomas Peterson stepped forward as well. I lost 3 children to this sickness, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. And I blamed Miss Morgan because it was easier than having no one to blame, but she's been trying to help us all along, and tonight she found the real cause. I was wrong about her, we all were. A murmur went through the crowd as this sank in. Beatrice felt Sam's hand find hers in the darkness, offering silent support as she faced the town that had so recently called for her head. What do we do now? Someone called out. Beatrice stepped forward. First, no one uses water from Willow Creek not for drinking, cooking, bathing, laundry, or anything else. Second, all water, even from wells, should be boiled before use as a precaution. Third, we need to properly seal off that outhouse and assess if there are any other potential sources of contamination upstream. And the people who are already sick, Mrs. Dawson asked, fear for her twins evident in her voice. Keep them hydrated with boiled water, Beatrice instructed. Change bedding frequently and burn what you remove. Wash your hands thoroughly with soap after caring for them. I have some medicines that may help ease symptoms, and I'll visit each family tomorrow to provide what I can. The meeting continued late into the night as plans were made to address the crisis. By dawn, water barrels were being set up in the town square with strict instructions for boiling and storage. A committee was formed to examine and seal the contaminated outhouse, and another to check upstream for any additional problems. As the sun rose over Hangtown, Beatrice found herself standing alone with Sam on the porch of the sheriff's office, watching the town mobilize with new purpose. "You did it," Sam said quietly. "You saved this town." Beatrice shook her head. "We saved it together. I couldn't have done this without you, Sam." He turned to face her, his eyes serious in the early morning light. "When I first saw you 6 months ago, stepping off that stagecoach with your chin held high despite all the whispers, I knew you were different, special, but I had no idea how brave you truly were." Beatrice felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I was terrified the entire time." "That's what makes it brave," he said simply, "doing what needs to be done despite the fear." His hand reached up tentatively to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gentle touch sent shivers down her spine. "Miss Morgan," a voice called, breaking the moment. "Mrs. Dawson was hurrying toward them. "One of my twins, Emily, she's taken a turn for the worse. Please, will you come?" Beatrice nodded immediately. "Of course, let me get my supplies." As she gathered her medical bag, Sam touched her arm. "I'll come with you." Together, they followed Mrs. Dawson to her home, where 5-year-old Emily lay burning with fever, her breathing labored. Beatrice set to work immediately, preparing a cool compress and mixing a tincture to help reduce the fever. "Sam, I need fresh water boiled and then cooled," she instructed. "And clean cloths if Mrs. Dawson has them." He nodded and set about the tasks without hesitation. As Beatrice worked to save the child, she was acutely aware of his presence, his steady support making her own hands surer, her mind clearer. For hours, they fought for Emily's life, Beatrice directing and Sam assisting without question. When the child's fever finally broke near midday, the relief in the room was palpable. "She's going to recover," Beatrice told the weeping mother. "Keep giving her the medicine I've left, make sure she drinks plenty of boiled water, and she should continue to improve." Mrs. Dawson clasped Beatrice's hands in hers. "Thank you, I was wrong about you, we all were. Can you forgive us?" Beatrice smiled tiredly. "There's nothing to forgive. Fear makes us all do things we wouldn't otherwise do." As they left the Dawson home, Sam insisted Beatrice rest. "You've been up all night and worked through the morning, you need sleep." "There are other sick people who need help," she protested. "And you'll be no help to them if you collapse," he countered. "The sheriff converted his office into a temporary bedroom for you. Just a few hours, Beatrice. I promise to wake you if you're needed urgently." Too exhausted to argue further, she allowed him to lead her back to the jail, where a cot had indeed been set up in the sheriff's office. Sam left her at the door with a promise to return later, and Beatrice barely had time to remove her shoes before sleep claimed her. When she woke, the light coming through the window suggested late afternoon. Someone had covered her with a blanket while she slept, and a tray with bread, cheese, and a cup of tea sat on the desk nearby. Beatrice ate hungrily, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal in over a day. As she finished, the door opened and Sam entered, looking freshly washed and changed but as tired as she felt. "You're awake," he said, smiling. "Good, how do you feel?" "Better," she admitted. "Thank you for insisting I rest. How are things in town?" "Improving," he reported. "No new cases since yesterday, and most of the sick are showing signs of recovery. The men have fully sealed off that outhouse and are working on diverting the small stream away from the creek until it can be properly cleaned." Beatrice sighed with relief. "That's wonderful news." "There's more," Sam added, sitting across from her. The town council met this afternoon. They've officially cleared you of all suspicion and want to offer a public apology. She blinked in surprise. That's unexpected. Not really, Sam said with a slight smile. You saved their children, after all, and Thomas Peterson spoke quite passionately on your behalf. Mr. Peterson, really? Sam nodded. He said that grief had blinded him, but your compassion even toward those who wronged you opened his eyes. He's been one of your strongest advocates today. Beatrice shook her head in wonder. People can surprise you, I suppose. Speaking of surprises, Sam continued, a hint of nervousness entering his voice, the council had another proposal. They've asked if you would consider becoming the town's official doctor at least until they can recruit a physician from Sacramento or San Francisco. Me, but I'm not a certified doctor. I never went to medical school. But you have knowledge, experience, and most importantly, you've proven yourself during this crisis, Sam pointed out. They're offering the use of Dr. Hamilton's old office and a modest salary. Beatrice's mind raced with the possibilities. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Sam encouraged. Hangtown needs you, Beatrice. She looked at him closely. And what about you, Sam? What do you need? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Sam's eyes softened as he gazed at her. I need to know if you're staying, he said simply. Because I've been thinking about building a house on that plot of land I own just outside of town. It's a good spot close enough to town for convenience but far enough for privacy. Has a nice view of the mountains. Good water supply, too, from a spring that doesn't connect to Willow Creek. Beatrice's heart quickened. That sounds lovely. It would be, he agreed, especially if I wasn't living there alone. The implication was clear and heat rushed to Beatrice's face. Sam, I'm not proposing marriage right this minute, he clarified quickly. That would be too soon, I know, but I am declaring my intentions, Beatrice Morgan. These past few days have only confirmed what I've felt since I first saw you, that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to court you properly. Beatrice found herself speechless, a rare occurrence. This man who had stood by her when the entire town turned against her, who had believed in her without question, who had carried water to her door when others blocked her way, he was offering her a future she hadn't dared to imagine. I'd like that very much, she finally managed to say, her voice soft but sure. The smile that broke across Sam's face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. He reached across the desk and took her hand in his. Then you'll stay and accept the town's offer? Beatrice nodded. Yes to both. Though I suspect the townspeople's goodwill might be somewhat fragile. It might, Sam acknowledged, but you won't face any challenges alone anymore, I promise you that. The sincerity in his voice made her believe him completely. For the first time since arriving in Hangtown, Beatrice felt like she had found not just a place to live, but a home. Over the following weeks, Hangtown slowly recovered from the typhoid outbreak. No new cases emerged after the water supply was secured, and most of those who had fallen ill eventually recovered, though the town mourned those who hadn't survived, including the Peterson children. Beatrice settled into Dr. Hamilton's old office, transforming it into a warm, welcoming space where she treated everything from mining injuries to childbirth complications. Initially, some townspeople remained wary, but as her knowledge and compassion proved themselves time and again, even the most skeptical came to respect her skills. True to his word, Sam began courting her properly. He would arrive at her office with flowers picked from the hillsides or surprise her with picnic lunches on busy days. On Sundays, they would ride out to his land, where construction on a modest but comfortable house was underway. Their courtship became the talk of Hangtown, though now the gossip held warmth rather than suspicion. The town that had once accused her of witchcraft now watched with approval as the handsome cowboy and their lady doctor built a life together. 3 months after the typhoid crisis, on a clear autumn day, Sam took Beatrice to see the completed house. It stood proudly on a gentle slope overlooking the valley, its fresh-cut timber gleaming in the sunlight. It's beautiful, Sam, she breathed as he led her through the room's spacious kitchen. A comfortable sitting room with bookshelves already built for her medical texts, 2 bedrooms, and a small room he had designated as her home office for treating patients who couldn't make it to town. "There's one more thing I want to show you," he said, leading her back outside and around to a small garden area behind the house. There, set in the center of what would become her herb garden, was a hand-carved wooden bench inscribed with the words, "For Beatrice, who heals with her hands and loves with her heart." Tears sprang to her eyes as she ran her fingers over the engraving. "Oh, Sam." He took her hands in his and dropped to one knee before her. "Beatrice Morgan, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You're brave, brilliant, and beautiful, and I fall more in love with you every day. Will you marry me and make this house our home?" "Yes," she whispered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." He slipped a delicate gold ring onto her finger, a simple band with a small pearl that had belonged to his mother. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a tender kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Their wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Hangtown. To Beatrice's surprise, the entire town turned out for the occasion. The same people who had once painted "Witch" on her door now filled the pews to witness her happiness. Thomas Peterson and his wife even presented them with a handmade quilt as a wedding gift, a peace offering, and a symbol of the healing that had taken place in more ways than one. Sheriff Wilson gave her away, and Mrs. Dawson served as her matron of honor, with the now healthy Dawson twins as flower girls. Sam stood tall and proud at the altar, his ranch hands serving as groomsmen, his eyes never leaving Beatrice as she walked down the aisle in a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Dawson had helped her sew. "I, Samuel Xavier, take thee, Beatrice Morgan, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to stand beside you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, just as I stood beside you when others would not. I promise to trust in your knowledge, to support your healing work, and to love you faithfully all the days of my life." Beatrice's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her own vows. "I, Beatrice Morgan, take thee, Samuel Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with the same unwavering faith you showed me in my darkest hour. I promise to build a home with you filled with compassion, respect, and joy. And I promise to stand beside you, just as you stood beside me, all the days of our lives." As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, Beatrice felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The kiss they shared was met with cheers and applause from a community that had become, against all odds, her own. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by every family in Hangtown. There was music and dancing, laughter and tears, as the town celebrated not just a union between two people, but a new chapter in their collective story. As the sun began to set, Sam took Beatrice's hand and led her away from the festivities toward the waiting wagon that would take them to their new home. "Are you happy, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, helping her up onto the seat. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning against his shoulder as he took up the reins. As they drove away from town, the cheers of well-wishers fading behind them, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a Philadelphia doctor's daughter denied education because of her gender, to a woman suspected of witchcraft in a frontier town, to a respected healer and beloved wife, her path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Their first night in their new home was everything Beatrice had dreamed of and more. Sam carried her over the threshold with a kiss that spoke of promises kept and those yet to be fulfilled. They moved together in the soft lamplight, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention they had given to learning each other's hearts. Later, wrapped in Sam's arms as moonlight spilled through the window, Beatrice whispered, "Do you remember what you said when you brought water to my door that day, when everyone else in town was calling me a witch?" Sam's fingers traced lazy patterns along her bare shoulder. "I said I trusted you." Such simple words, she mused, but they meant everything to me then. "I meant them," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, And I mean them still. I will always trust you, Beatrice Xavier, with my health, my happiness, and my heart. And I will always trust you with mine, she promised, sealing the vow with a kiss. The days turned to weeks, the weeks to months, and the months to years. Beatrice continued her medical practice, eventually training a young woman named Catherine as her assistant. Sam's ranch prospered, and he gained a reputation as one of the fairest and most successful ranchers in the territory. Their home became known as a place of healing and hospitality. Travelers in need of medical attention knew they could knock on the Xavier door at any hour and be received with kindness. Young women interested in medicine came to study with Beatrice, who was determined to pass on her knowledge freely, especially to those who had been told, as she once was, that healing wasn't women's work. 2 years after their wedding, Beatrice gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Thomas Xavier. The middle name was chosen in honor of Thomas Peterson, who had transformed from her greatest accuser to one of her most steadfast friends. When James was 3, he was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Sarah, named for both their mothers. As their family grew, so did Hangtown. The gold that had given the settlement its start eventually dwindled, but by then the town had established itself as an important stop on the routes to Sacramento and San Francisco. New businesses opened, a proper school was built, and in 1859, a certified doctor finally arrived from the East, but rather than replace Beatrice, he asked to partner with her, recognizing the respect she had earned and the knowledge she possessed. Through all the changes, the story of the typhoid outbreak and how it had nearly torn the town apart became something of a local legend. Children who hadn't yet been born during those dark days grew up hearing about the brave woman who had been wrongly accused but had saved the town anyway, and the loyal cowboy who had stood by her side with water and trust when both were in short supply. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the town surprised the Xaviers with a special celebration. During the festivities, Sheriff Wilson, now Mayor Wilson, unveiled a new town well with a plaque that read, "In honor of Beatrice Morgan Xavier, whose healing hands and forgiving heart taught us that trust is as essential as clean water for a community to thrive." Beatrice, now in her mid-30s with strands of silver beginning to appear in her dark hair, wept openly at the gesture. Sam stood beside her, as always, his arm around her waist, pride evident in every line of his face. Later that night, as their children slept peacefully in their beds, Sam and Beatrice sat on the carved bench in her herb garden, now lush and thriving with medicinal plants of all kinds. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Beatrice asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "When you first started bringing water to my cabin," Sam chuckled softly, "I hoped, but I couldn't have imagined just how good it would be." He turned to look at her in the moonlight. "You know, I fell in love with you the first time I saw you examining those herbs in your garden, talking to yourself about their properties." Beatrice laughed. "I thought you thought I was crazy." "No," he said seriously, "I thought you were fascinating. A woman who knew her own mind, who wasn't afraid to pursue knowledge even when others said she shouldn't." "And now look at us," she said, gesturing toward their home where their children slept, and beyond to the town that had embraced them. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if there had never been an outbreak, if the town had never turned against me." "I'd still have found a way to court you," Sam assured her, "though I might have had more competition if you hadn't been briefly suspected of witchcraft." She swatted his arm playfully. "Samuel Xavier, that's a terrible joke, but it made you smile," he pointed out, kissing her lightly, "and making you smile is still my favorite thing to do. After all these years," he confirmed, "and for all the years to come." As they sat together under the stars, Beatrice reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. From the moment she'd stepped off that stagecoach in Hangtown, determined to make a new life for herself away from the constraints of Philadelphia society, to this moment of contentment in the arms of the man who had seen her true worth when others saw only suspicion. In a town that had been founded on the pursuit of gold, Beatrice had found something far more valuable, a place where she could use her gifts freely. A community that had learned to trust her as she had learned to trust them, and a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger for it. "I love you, Sam," she whispered into the quiet night. "Thank you for trusting me when no one else would." He tightened his arm around her, his voice warm and certain in the darkness. "I loved you then, I love you now, and I'll love you always, Beatrice. That's a trust that will never be broken." And as they walked hand in hand back to the home they had built together, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Their love, like the town they had helped to heal, would continue to grow and flourish for many years to come, a testament to the power of trust, forgiveness, and the courage to stand beside someone when the whole world stands against them. 15 years after the typhoid outbreak that had nearly cost Beatrice her life and had ultimately given her a new one, the Xaviers hosted a gathering at their ranch to celebrate their daughter Elizabeth's 12th birthday. The property, once a simple homestead, had grown into one of the most prosperous in the region, with a larger house to accommodate their growing family and frequent visitors. James, now 15, had grown into a thoughtful young man with his father's strength and his mother's compassion. He worked alongside Sam on the ranch but also showed an interest in medicine, often accompanying Beatrice on her rounds. Elizabeth, spirited and bright, had her mother's gift for healing and her father's easy way with people. They had been joined 7 years earlier by another son, Michael, born during a blizzard so severe that Sam had delivered him himself under Beatrice's calm instruction. And just 2 years ago, their family had been completed with the arrival of twins, a boy and girl they named Joseph and Rose. The birthday celebration brought together nearly everyone from Hangtown, now officially renamed Placerville, though old-timers still called it by its original name. Many faces had changed over the years as people moved on and new settlers arrived, but the core of the community remained the same. Thomas Peterson, his hair now completely gray, attended with his second wife, a kind woman who had helped him find joy again after his devastating loss. They had no children of their own but had taken in 3 orphans from the mining camps, giving them a loving home and a future. Mayor Wilson, stooped with age but still sharp-minded, sat in the place of honor at the long table set up under the oak trees. Catherine, once Beatrice's assistant and now a skilled healer in her own right, helped serve the meal with her husband and their young son. As Beatrice moved among the guests, making sure everyone had food and drink, she paused to watch Sam teaching a group of children a game in the wide yard. At 50, he was still as handsome as the day she'd met him, though his dark hair now had silver at the temples and laugh lines framed his eyes. Those eyes still looked at her with the same warmth and devotion they always had. "You've built something remarkable here," a voice said beside her. Dr. William Grant, the physician who had arrived in 1859 and become her partner and friend, stood watching the scene with her. "We all have," Beatrice replied. "The town, the practice, this community, it's been a collective effort." "True," he acknowledged, "but it might never have happened if you hadn't stood your ground during that outbreak, or if your husband hadn't stood beside you." Beatrice smiled at the memory, no longer painful after so many years. "He brought me water when the town blocked my access to the well, said he trusted me when everyone else called me a witch." "A wise man," Dr. Grant noted, "though I suspect he was already half in love with you by then." "More than half," Sam said, joining them with little Rose on his shoulders. "I was completely smitten from the start, just too proper to admit it." He set their daughter down and she ran off to join the other children, her dark curls so like Beatrice's bouncing as she went. "I've been meaning to tell you," Dr. Grant said. "I received a letter from the medical college in San Francisco. They've agreed to consider female applicants for next year's class. I mentioned your name as a potential guest lecturer." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Me? But I've never had formal training." "Which makes you all the more valuable as a teacher," he pointed out. "You've learned medicine through observation, experience, and necessity. That perspective is invaluable, especially to women entering a field that still resists their presence." "You should do it," Sam encouraged, slipping an arm around her waist. You've always wanted to help other women pursue medicine. Beatrice considered it, imagining standing before a class of young women eager to learn what she had taught herself over years of practice. "I'll think about it," she promised. As the afternoon progressed into evening, lanterns were lit around the property, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Elizabeth, the birthday girl, had convinced some of the men to play their instruments, and dancing began on the packed earth in front of the barn. Sam extended his hand to Beatrice with a slight bow. "May I have this dance, Dr. Xavier?" "You may indeed, Mr. Xavier," she replied, taking his hand and allowing him to lead her into the circle of dancers. As they moved together to the lively fiddle music, Beatrice was transported back to their wedding day when they had danced like this in the town square, full of hope and promises for the future promises they had kept faithfully through the years. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, noting her contemplative expression. "About how far we've come," she answered. "From that day you first brought water to my cabin to this moment dancing at our daughter's birthday with our family all around us." Sam's eyes softened. "It's been quite a journey." "And not always an easy one," she acknowledged. There had been hardships, of course. Years of drought that threatened the ranch, a particularly severe winter when they'd lost most of their cattle, the difficult birth of the twins that had left Beatrice bedridden for weeks. But through it all, they had faced each challenge together, their bond only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. "No," Sam agreed, "not always easy, but always worth it." As the music slowed, he pulled her closer, their bodies moving in perfect harmony born of years of partnership. Over his shoulder, Beatrice could see James dancing awkwardly with Catherine's niece, his face flushed with the particular embarrassment of a teenage boy experiencing his first crush. Elizabeth was showing Michael how to do a simple two-step, her patience with her younger brother touching to see. "Our children are growing up so fast," Beatrice murmured. "Too fast," Sam agreed. "Soon James will be heading off to college if he decides on medical school." "And what about Elizabeth? She's already talking about wanting to travel," Sam chuckled. "She's like her mother, brave, curious, determined." "Poor girl," Beatrice said with a smile. "Fortunate girl," Sam corrected, "to have such a remarkable woman to model herself after." The music ended and they joined the applause for the musicians. Before another dance could begin, Mayor Wilson called for everyone's attention, tapping his cane against the ground. "If I could have a moment," he announced, his voice still commanding despite his years. "I know we're here to celebrate young Elizabeth's birthday and many happy returns, my dear, but there's another celebration I think is in order." He gestured for Beatrice and Sam to join him. Puzzled, they made their way to his side. 15 years ago this month," the mayor continued, "our town faced its darkest hour. Sickness swept through Hangtown, taking our loved ones and turning neighbor against neighbor. We nearly lost not only lives but our very humanity in those dark days." A solemn silence fell over the gathering as people remembered. "But in our midst was a woman of extraordinary courage and compassion," Mayor Wilson said, looking at Beatrice. "A woman who, despite being wrongfully accused, persisted in seeking the truth and saving those she could. And beside her stood a man who demonstrated what true loyalty and trust look like." He raised his glass. "To Beatrice and Samuel Xavier, whose union we celebrate not just as a marriage between two people, but as a symbol of what our community aspires to be founded on trust, strengthened by adversity, and dedicated to the well-being of all." "To the Xaviers," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Beatrice felt tears sting her eyes as she looked out at the faces of people who had once feared her and now honored her. Sam's hand found hers, squeezing gently in shared emotion. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Beatrice and Sam sat on the porch of their home, a quilt drawn over their laps against the cool night air. "That was quite a tribute from Mayor Wilson," Sam said, his arm around her shoulders. "It was," Beatrice agreed. "Though sometimes I still find it hard to believe how much things have changed." "Not everything has changed," Sam pointed out. "I still bring you water every morning." It was true. In all their years together, Sam had maintained the habit of bringing Beatrice a glass of water each morning before she rose, a simple ritual that had begun in defiance and continued as an act of love. "And I still trust you with my life," Beatrice responded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "As I trust you with mine," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Always have, always will." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars overhead, content in the knowledge that the trust they had built between them had not only sustained their love, but had helped heal a community and create a legacy that would outlive them both. In the years that followed, Beatrice did become a guest lecturer at the medical college in San Francisco, making the journey twice a year to share her knowledge with the women who would become the next generation of physicians. She published a medical guide specifically for frontier communities, combining traditional medical knowledge with practical advice for situations where doctors might not be available. Sam expanded the ranch into a successful breeding operation, developing a strain of cattle particularly well suited to the California climate. James eventually did pursue medicine, studying first under his mother and then formally at the same college where she lectured. Elizabeth, true to her adventurous spirit, became one of the first female journalists to cover the expanding Western territories, though she always returned home to Placerville between assignments. Michael grew up to take over the ranch operations when Sam began to step back, while Joseph found his calling as a teacher in the school that had grown from a one-room building to a proper academy. Rose, the youngest, combined her mother's healing knowledge with her father's love of animals to become a veterinarian, rare for a woman of her time, but supported wholeheartedly by her parents who had always defied convention themselves. As Beatrice and Sam entered their golden years, their home remained the heart of the community, a place where people gathered to celebrate, to mourn, to heal, and to remember. The story of the typhoid outbreak and the woman wrongfully accused became part of local folklore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of fear and the power of trust. On their 50th wedding anniversary, celebrated in the same yard where they had marked so many milestones, Beatrice, now in her 70s with silver hair and hands that bore the gentle marks of a lifetime of healing, found herself once again dancing in the arms of her husband. Though they moved more slowly than they once had, the love between them was as strong as ever. 50 years, Sam marveled, his voice deeper with age but still warm with affection. "Did you ever imagine we'd have all this when I first brought water to your door?" Beatrice looked around at their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, at the community that had become their extended family, at the life they had built from the most unlikely of beginnings. "No," she admitted with a smile. "But I'm grateful every day that you had the courage to say those 3 simple words that changed everything." "I trust her," Sam recited, remembering the moment clearly despite the passage of time. "The truest words I ever spoke." "And the greatest gift I ever received," Beatrice replied, resting her head against his chest as they swayed to the music, surrounded by the legacy of love and trust they had built together. As the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire journey together, casting golden light over the land they had tended and the community they had helped to heal, Beatrice and Samuel Xavier continued their dance, a testament to the enduring power of trust, the healing force of love, and the remarkable journey that can begin with something as simple as a bucket of water and the courage to stand beside someone when the whole world stands against them.